Okay.
Go.
Okay, good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining this webinar where we're going to another stage in thinking about how we really need to deal with the climate emergency. So I'd like to show you my first slide or my second slide.
Sorry, hang on. It didn't show up when I went to share it. Hang on. I have to. Right, and that's better. That's better. It's showing up?
Yeah, that's our first slide. We can get rid of that slide now. And now I just want to acknowledge that we're meeting on the land of the Darramurrugal and the Darug people and pay my respects to their elders past and present, and I pay my respects to anyone wherever you are and may be. So we're here to talk about really doing something at a local level to think globally. And we know we are being impacted by the climate emergency. It's happening over and over again. It's causing terrible suffering and destruction. And we know that we have to act quickly because we are running out of time. Now, we've got a new Labor government. They've made terrific beginning initiatives. They've made a commitment to reducing our targets to 43% cut, and that's gone through the parliament. And we know that we have to do even more than that, and there is positive hope that that will happen. But there's a lot of things happening with the politics of climate, and we just have to keep at it and not let go. And of course, the big issue is not opening up any more coal or gas mines.
Oh, you want to go into the switch? Right, sorry. Okay. Sorry. Sorry, I thought we were going to talk for a bit longer. Righto, here we go.
So what we're really going to do tonight is we're going to talk about Saul Griffin's book, The Big Switch. And that is kind of like a blueprint plan of how we can act locally to rapidly decarbonize our domestic suburbs where we electrify everything. Now, Saul is a outstanding engineer, inventor, and he had a lot of prominence and been on a lot of talks leading up to the elections and after the election. And we got an opportunity during my campaign to actually meet him on Zoom and have a talk about it and whether it was possible for Bradfield. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you an excerpt of a video that was made in March this year. It was 2 months before the election. It was organized by a collection of councils that involve Ku-ring-gai Council, Willoughby Council, Lane Cove, Mossman, and North Sydney. And in this video, they interview Saul Griffith, and that's available online. But in the introduction, it says that the council, such as Ku-ring-gai Council, is committed to electrifying with renewables. They make that statement. They talk about things that they've done. And really, it's about us holding them to account and really pushing this agenda. So it's quite a lengthy video, and I've actually gone through and just found the place where Saul actually goes in and he talks about how his plan is for his suburb of Ostermere and how he visions how that could be decarbonized as a template and as a case study that could happen everywhere. So I'd like to show that video, that section of the video. You can watch it later, and it's actually quite interesting afterwards what he says. But I just think let's look at this section where he talks, and I want you, when he talks, to think about how it relates to Bradfield and how we as a local area could take some of his ideas and do it locally in his community.
So what does it look to get to true zero emissions for a typical Australian suburb? Let's think about communities in terms of postcodes. There's 3,300 postcodes in Australia. There's on average 9,000 people in each one of those postcodes. There's 2 to 6 suburbs in each postcode. There's about 3,500 households in each suburb. I relocated from San Francisco to Austinmere, so I live in the just north of Wollongong, and I'm going to use this as the case study, yet the story can be very similar for other Australian suburbs. So let's talk about Rewiring Australia in terms of postcode 2515, which is Austinmere, which is this lovely strip of land just south of the Royal National Park. There's 6 suburbs: Clifton, Scarborough, Wombara, Coaldale, Austinmere, Thirroul. There's 11,000 people, 3,000 families, 6,000 children, 4,500 households, 2.7 people per house, 1.8 motor vehicles per house. In every way, this is nearly exactly, except we are slightly higher income than average for Australia, but we are very, very typical.
Unoccupied, between the dwellings and occupied?
There are unoccupied homes. Excuse me, sir, if you wouldn't mind muting. About 5 to 10% of households in any postcode are unoccupied. So they're vacant for some period of the year. So this, you can get this data. This is not my data. This is the Australian Bureau of Statistics. This comes from our national census. Let's talk about Austinmere as a suburb, because people often think about communities in terms of a suburb. There's 2,500 people, 1,200 or 1,300 school-aged children, 1,000 dwellings, which is a convenient number to remember. Again, 2.7 people, 1.9 per household. Today, we use natural gas for a bunch of cooking, a bunch of heating, and we use petrol and diesel. If everyone could take just a moment to check whether they are on mute or not, that would be fabulous, because the echo is killing me. All right, thank you. Sorry. So today we're mostly fossil fuel powered, and unfortunately in New South Wales, 3/4 of it is from coal. To get to zero emissions, it's simple. We need to electrify the demand side machines and decarbonize the supply of our electricity. That looks like electrifying the 1.9 vehicles, putting a vehicle charger in every house, electrifying the hot water heater, electrifying the space heating systems. This is called what a heat pump or a split system looks like. Electrify the cooking systems, solar on the roof, battery on the side of the house, and upgrade our switchboards so that they can intelligently move these electrical loads around. This is to brutally simplify what we need to do. You may think that all Australians are really different, but in an incredibly similar way, all of our homes roughly have these systems. To clean up the electricity, a lot of it will come from the rooftop. We'll store some in batteries, but we need to do solar and wind and hydro on the grid, and that will help us balance this whole system. So here's a primer. Electricity is delivered over your suburb on an 11 kilovolt distribution network. Where I am, it's Endeavour Energy. It might be the same where you are. When you look up at a utility pole, you'll see 2 sets of lines at different layers. The top set is typically 3 wires. That's the 11,000 volts, 11 kilovolts. Below that are 4 lines where they have been transformed to 240 volts. In our community, Wombara Zone substation is the substation. It's a machine that looks like this. You can probably find it down behind the railroad tracks somewhere in Woollahra. That zone substation feeds the distribution network. These utility poles that have a little lump or a wart on the side, that's a distribution transformer. That feeds the 240 volts. Typically each string, and you can see 5 strings here, serves around about 1,000 households. Today in Wombara, this is what the energy looks like. It's about 4 megawatts in the winter. It's about 2 megawatts in the summer, and you can see there's a few really cold days where there's extra heating and extra lighting. There's a few really hot days in the summer where there's extra air conditioning, and this is sort of the natural variation day to day throughout the year. That's what we do today, but we haven't electrified all of our end uses. So we can actually model the effect of electrification on our local energy consumption. We know that if we take a petrol-powered truck, you know, like a Ford Ranger, today about 80% of the petrol is lost as waste heat. If we have an electric truck of the same size, same weight, etc., and we're powering it with wind and solar, it uses about 2/3 of the energy. It's much, much more efficient. If we use natural gas to heat water, it's quite efficient in terms of using the natural gas, but the magic of these heat pumps is they extract the heat from our surrounding air and they pump it in the house, and for every 1 unit of electricity you get 3 units of heat or 4 units of heat in our mild climate, and that's why they use 2/3 of the amount of energy to heat the same amount of water. The same is true of our hot water systems. If we use heat pumps, they're about 2/3 the energy of our natural gas or electric resistance. And even if we go to electric resistance or induction cooking, that's about half of the energy of our natural gas. This leads to an extraordinary result. And I saw someone in the question time, sorry, my slides aren't progressing. I saw somebody say, well, what about efficiency? Don't we need to focus on energy efficiency? To that, I would say we have been focusing on energy efficiency since it became an issue as the solution to the 1973 oil crisis, and we have made practically no gains. It turns out that electrification is the efficiency we always wanted. We could take the average Australian household that currently uses 97 kilowatt hours per day of energy in all its form, and we can make it use 35 kilowatt hours of electricity that does all of the same things. This is what it looks like. Here's today on the left, 97 kilowatt hours. This orange up here is the energy that is lost burning coal to make you electricity. It's lost before it even gets to you. This big gray is the petrol and diesel, which shrinks enormously when you do electric in the fully electrified household on the right. Similarly, you can see some gains in the water heating and the space heating here when they go to heat pumps in this picture on the right. That's a good news story.
Can I stop you there, Saul, because that is something worthwhile elaborating on. So what you're saying here is that currently with the mix of fossil fuels that we're consuming and that's powering everything, we're consuming about 97 kilowatt hours. But if we electrified everything, it could go down to as low as 35. Is that what you're saying?
That's right. The average Australian household goes from, let's call it 100 kilowatt hours a day to 35 kilowatt hours a day. That is without anything that you traditionally associate with efficiency. So I didn't double glaze your windows. I didn't put more insulation in. I just converted all of your machines to electric and I powered them all with renewables. You could get additional gains, but they'll only make that 35 go down to 32 or 30 by doing the traditional efficiency things. So while I like efficiency, and all engineers do, it's not what I would obsess about, nor finance, nor focus on, because it's not the most cost-effective way to eliminate the majority of our emissions at this point in history. So, if knowing that, this is that same chart I showed you earlier about Wombara. That blue line before is now the black line. That's what we do today. If we electrify the remaining hot water and cooking and heating systems that are on natural gas, the new daily load will be this electric load. If we electrify one of the vehicles in every household, it'll be that orange load. And if we electrify all the vehicles, so the fully electrified Wombara will be this red line. So instead of having a 100% swing from 2 megawatts in the summer to 4 megawatts in the winter, we have the new energy world will be 6 megawatts in the summer to about 7.5 megawatts in the winter. And actually that decreasing variation means electrifying everything makes the seasonal problem that a lot of people sweat about less of a problem. Similarly, the electrifying everything makes the daily problem less of a problem. And why is that? Well, here's the daily variation. This is 30 different days in January last year, and you can see the different loads. You can see the 30 different days in July. where the loads are different, but this should give you some comfort. 1,900 electric vehicles in that community will have a battery capacity equivalent to 3 days of storage of all the vehicle driving and all the appliances being run in that community. 1,000 household batteries provide a further 1 day storage, and if you use the water heaters by charging them in advance as batteries, you get another 4 hours. So inherently built into this new infrastructure we will all own is enough storage to make you not have to sweat in great detail the 24 to 48 hour problem. If we go a little bit further, then you say, well, how do we supply all of that energy? This is a well-known website you can look at, and it looks at existing installations of solar and what the total potential of the rooftops is. This is fairly conservative. It only assumes pretty small solar installations on each roof. This is our suburb, 2515, or our postcode that includes those suburbs. It could produce, I put the headline at the top, 75 gigawatt hours of electricity per year versus the 52 gigawatt hours of electricity that this community will use in a fully electrified version of itself. So in theory, over the course of a year, we can produce everything purely on our rooftop solar. That's not an argument for we should take everyone off grid and all island ourselves. It's just an argument that we should maximize that. There's a hell of a lot of capacity there. And for the argument I gave you earlier, it's the cheapest electricity you will buy. The reason you don't want to wholly commit to that is this one. So just look at the dotted lines in the middle. These are the average daily production per square meter. And you can see in the summer months, about 6 kilowatt hours per square meter. In the winter months, about 3 in our postcode. It will be slightly better where you are because you're an hour north of me, 2 hours north of me. So you'll have a slightly lower dip in the winter. What does that mean? If here in the dotted line is the current, red line is the current community electricity load through the year. In the red line is what happens when we electrify the whole community, all the vehicles, all the homes. So we increase it a lot. If we had 50% of our rooftops covered in these reasonably sized solar installations, we'd be able to meet the summer demand of our electric community, but we'd fall 50% short in the winter. If we put solar 100% on our rooftops, we would generate almost double what we need in the summer, but we would still struggle for the 2 or 3 months in the middle of the year. This is a real problem. It's a more difficult problem in Victoria, and it's a more difficult problem again in Tasmania. And really, that is why the future, if we're thinking about the whole country and optimizing, needs to look like this: as much solar as you can in your local area, but we must connect to each other, and we must connect to offshore wind, to hydroelectricity, to wind, and to solar farms. Because while we may have a couple of cloudy days in New South Wales, we can lean on South Australia when their wind is blowing and their sun is shining. And we have enormous network benefits and make all of Australia more resilient and more robust, the more broadly the geographic area from which we draw our renewables. So the balance ultimately is going to be that resiliency versus the lowest cost, most locally produced electricity we can imagine. And to be a little bit cheeky, we've been struggling as an environmentalist movement for so many years to imagine trying to get to 80 or 90 or 100 that we've never really thought about, well, why don't we just have 200 or more? And if you think about what I said about that rooftop solar that costs 5 or 6 cents a kilowatt hour, if I had 25 or 50% more capacity, it's only another 2 or 3 or 4 cents. That's going to be cheaper than the batteries and cheaper than bringing it from the grid. So we need to, this is what I'm thinking of sort of calling the abundance agenda. This problem is easier to solve. It's easier to have a robust Australia if we think a little bit more about abundance and not just trying to squeak over the line to 100. Okay, now quickly to talk about the unbelievable effects this could have for economic renewable in communities. Where is the technology going? Over here on the left, these are the costs today relative to the incumbent technology. So you can see an electric vehicle, that purple line costs 170% today of the equivalent petrol-powered vehicle. This is comparing a Hyundai Kona electric to a Hyundai Kona petrol. But you can see, and most organizations agree, 2024, 2025, the cost of the electric vehicle will be the same in the showroom as the petrol vehicle. That's because this blue line is happening. Batteries are falling at an unbelievable rate. Year on year, 5 to 10% cost reductions in battery packs. Heat pumps are improving a little bit on that red line. Yellow is staying, the solar, which is the technology gains are being offset by us winding down the rebates, but it's roughly staying the same. But you can use these costs as a model for what economically will happen in your community. What do we do today? Honestly, the numbers are not going to be very difficult for any of the people watching this in their household. Today, here's your household. You spend $4,872 a year. You send $1,000 a year out of your zip code, creates very few jobs purchasing electricity from the grid. We spend $3,500 a year per household that leaves your postcode immediately, with maybe creating one job at the local service station. Not a very rewarding job, and ultimately we're sending this money to despots in Venezuela and Saudi Arabia and Russia, and it's not a great idea. In where we are, there's still some natural gas connected to the homes, and that money again leaves the community without creating very many jobs and costing the community about $334 per household for the natural gas connections. We do have solar. It's about 27% of households, and that we are spending capex that goes to being financed, or goes to companies that make the solar. $41 of it is in finance, the companies that provide the finance for it. But $20 of it is labor that happens internal, creates a job installing solar in our community. And we save a few dollars because that electricity is cheaper and we get some savings. But what happens as we looking at the community level, those numbers add up to about $6 million we spend in Austinmere per year that leaves the community, and a bit close to $25 million that leaves our local government area, postcode 2515. What could we do tomorrow, and how does this speak to the political opportunity, the economic opportunity, and opportunity for community renewal in Australia? So if we stop using coal and we use wind and solar, this electricity out here on the grid is actually getting cheaper because they're now cheaper sources. We electrify all the vehicles, so we stop spending that money for oil. We electrify all the heating systems. You can see the cooking and the heating systems. We stop buying that natural gas. To do that, we'll need to be financing in 2025. These are the estimates based on those cost reductions, about $2,000 in capital equipment expenditures per year and about $600 in finance. But critically, we're creating $400 in labor in the local community, and we're saving $4,500 on our total cost of energy bills. This nets out after financing that we're saving about $1,200 per household per year in 2025. And every household has got $1,600 that they're now spending in the local community, creating jobs, not sending overseas to petrostates. 2030 picture is even better. I'm just going to say the headline here: saving about $5,000 per household per year, creating about $5,600 in community spending, creating in all of those installation jobs, in the maintenance jobs, and then ultimately even better jobs. Because we have $5,000 in released household spending, they will be spending that on the children for music lessons and in local cafes, and there'll be a lot of what they call induced jobs in the economy based around this spending. You literally run out of football fields and school classrooms and surf lifesaving clubs you can build when you think about it at the community level. For Austinmere, 1,000 households, they'll be saving close to $5 million a year in the community, meaning $3.5 million not leaving the community every year to be spent on fossil fuels. Think about that, $3.5 million in a town with 1,000 households every year. If you then look again, sorry, something's going wrong here. For the whole postcode, about $20 million in community savings per year. So imagine one of your council areas with $20 million or more savings at the community level per year by 2030. By not choosing electrification, by not dramatically going down this path, we are in effect robbing our citizens from this windfall. So that's the abundance agenda. It's electrifying everything. It's eliminating all of our climate emissions. It's creating the jobs in our community. It's revitalizing our community economics, and it's saving money for households. And it is now technically possible and reasonably low risk. You can actually even now put basically every city council in Australia should have a dashboard that looks like this, that says this is our aspirations for rooftop solar, this is our aspirations for electric vehicles, here's our aspirations for kitchens, and we should be monitoring our progress against this dashboard that gives us a small chance of staying under 2 degrees. Now, to just personalize this a little bit, I was going to have my assistant make really pretty graphs for all of your suburbs today that looked like the nice ones I have for Ostermere, but he got COVID last night, so he was ridden out. So this is all I can do for you, which is to give you these teasers. You have much larger LGAs than 2515. Ku-ring-gai Council, 44,000 households could be saving $235 million per year in the community by 2030. Just imagine the community economic benefit of that. That's just Ku-ring-gai Council. Lane Cove, 12,000 households, $65 million a year. Mossman, 12,000 households, $62 million a year. North Sydney, 7,000 households, $37 million a year. City of Ryde, 28,000 households, $150 million a year. Willoughby Council, 6,000 households, $31 million a year. It adds up to close to $1 billion a year for the collection of councils in community savings. Think about how you could reinvest that in new pedestrian infrastructure, mass transit systems, schools, all of the things that actually matter to community a lot more than whether your car runs on petrol or electricity. Oh, you don't need that slide. We'll go back to the last one. There you go. And then I'll stop. Sorry, that was my monologue, but I think it's honestly, we've got to now talk tax, brass tacks. We have to start doing this as communities in Australia.
Okay, thank you so much for that. There was a lot of information happening there from Saul Griffith, but he was really trying to do a really concise overview of what he believes is possible and doable. And that's kind of the model that we would like to think about. So I might just stop and ask, is there any questions or comments that you might like to say at this point?
Just that it's well worthwhile getting hold of his book, people, and reading it, because there's a lot more in it than that.
Yeah. Yes, Peter.
Saul there talks about taking hot water from gas and electrifying it. You can go a step further than that, and you can actually install solar heat pumps. I actually have an evacuated tube system. When I installed that, it cut my energy costs by 25%. It was just a huge amount that just disappeared off the electricity bill. So there's less electricity that we actually need to use. Saul's presented just a general overview. He didn't want to get too complicated, but you can actually fine tune some of those things that he was talking about and achieve further gains and benefits.
We need him on the small group, Janine.
Yes. Yeah, so it's really, I mean, the fact is that we can, cut our energy costs and we can contribute money back into the community with this vision. And really, I think there's so much happening that's really, really right for these things to happen. But thank you, Peter, talking about how the hot water from the gas, because really that's, as you say, there's so much more that can be done. No, anybody else would like to make a comment? Yes, Kathy. You're mute, unmute.
Oh, sorry. I better unmute.
I have. You're unmuted. Go for it. Oh.
Sorry. There we go. From what I could understand, 100% of the residential population would have to be on this plan.
That's the
Have
goal.
to have solar.
Yeah, that's the goal. But you know, the thing is, it's not going to happen overnight. And but the idea is to really think about trying to get a pilot project happening where we can do this project. David, do you want to add something to that?
No, but I think that's a really good question, Catherine, and I don't think we've actually got a good answer to that yet, because you're right in the sense that the way that Paul is thinking, if I read him correctly, is that he wants to retro use the various substations that we've got. So when you saw that diagram of the major substation and then the poles, which are little substations, if you like, feeding 1,000 homes each, then my presumption in that is that your question is right, that if we were going to use a substation to be able to do the rewiring and also use the substations as batteries, which is part of what he's got in mind, then yes, at the moment, I can't understand how we could do that in stages. However, what I think Peter brought up is that what we could do in stages is to put solar panels on people's roofs. We could put hot water systems on using solar panels, or the evacuation pump that Peter's talking about. We can do lots of things apart from if we're doing it in a staged way. But that's something that I think is one of our challenges, to actually be able to work that through.
I agree with David. This is not something that'll happen in probably a big bang fashion. It's something that we're going to have to have a staged plan to institute. People will come on board. They'll be doubters. They'll be anti it because it's something that's new. But as they see other people around them doing it, they'll gradually start to come on board. I can always remember my boss. He thought I was mad going over to solar and the evacuated tube heating for hot water. We used to have regular discussions about my lunacy until one day he came up to me and said, I'm going to convert. He said, I've seen the light now, the economics is there. So it's a matter of not bullying people, but gradually bringing them along with you. The logic behind a lot of what is being said here is irrefutable. You can deny it for so long, but it eventually comes and swamps you. We have a problem. Well, I can only talk about Queensland. I don't know about New South Wales, but we have a problem in Queensland in that the power flows in a lot of our suburbs now are the wrong way, because we have something like, I think it's about 30% solar installations in suburbs. So it's now causing transformers and zone substations to have issues with power going the wrong way.
Yep, we've got that here too. Yeah. But I mean, Catherine, we won't do it now, but I've already got a case study of a Sydney apartment building with 70 apartments in it who've gone totally solar, and they've made other amazing changes, and they're still on the grid. They're on a green energy plan. So all of their energy is coming from renewable energy. but the differences have been enormous. And if you look at, Peter's right. I mean, I think one of the other things that I've got in mind about the way we move is that we actually gather research evidence about adopters and deniers, because I think what we're engaged in is basically a social change project. And we need to have that sort of information to be able to help us to plan the best way we can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To take David's line just a bit further, the evacuated tube system that I use is actually an Australian invention.
Yep.
But it's been left in the doldrums here in Australia. You go to Germany and those systems are absolutely everywhere.
Yeah, that's right.
And this is in Middle Europe where they don't get a lot of sun.
That's right.
But these systems work very efficiently,
Yep.
and you still get very hot water.
Yeah.
The other thing is that you've got to work on local and state government politicians. We've got to get changes to regulations for buildings and stuff like this, so that when we build blocks of units and stuff like this, we actually do use the rooftops to generate both hot water for the units and electricity. If you build more efficiency into your homes, you don't need as much heating and electricity. So it's a win-win situation. Again, as I travel around Germany, I'm sorry to be blowing the German trumpet here, but as I travel around Germany, you can see rooftop solar absolutely everywhere. I was even amazed. I was driving through a country area and there's this dilapidated old shack barely standing up, but it was covered in solar panels. They had a feed going off into the grid network. So this, it's just simply amazing. It's just a lack of will. It's people sort of staying back in the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages, as far as generation goes. One of the other things, if I'm going to ride a hobby horse, I'll finish on this, but we need to shut down coal-fired power facilities. That's the burning of coal, but often the boilers, the generators are still in good working condition. So all we have to do there is to substitute the way we heat water to produce steam. So you can take the coal out and you can still use the existing power generation. The other thing is that solar and wind are being poo-pooed because they're too expensive, simply because the new facilities are out in no man's land. They need to build new transmission lines to run them into zone substations and things like this. Whereas if you refurbish some of your coal-fired power into renewable power using, there's all sorts of techniques that they can use to produce steam. We can modify some of the power stations and then reuse the existing infrastructure and then therefore lower the cost.
Yes, I mean, we still haven't got solar on our roof. It's because we really want to understand, you know, what it all involves. And we worked it out to get a split system for our house. We'd need 32 panels on our roof.
Okay. Well,
That's
see,
a
that's
lot of panels.
well. That's well. I agree. I mean, picking up yours and Peter's point, that's why one of the most important prongs of what we've got to do is a community education program.
Yes.
Because a lot of it is not living in the Middle Ages. A lot of it is that people just are unaware and don't know.
Yeah.
And to give you an example that we're going to talk a little bit more about at some future time, is Janine and John and Peggy and I have just been to the Energy Next conference, and we were blown away. No, I mean, I reckon I know. I've tried to keep up as much as I can with what's happening, but what we learnt at that conference would just blow your minds.
Right.
And it certainly blew my mind. And so part of what we've got to do is we've got to educate people, and that's why the case studies are so important. But coming back to your point, Catherine, that's why Saul is talking about community storage and community power generation.
Right.
So, for example, when we had the Zoom with him, we talked about the whole idea. For example, if you take St Ives, of putting solar panels on every single business, every single school, every single sports, stadium, whatever, and then you would have a series of batteries that would then feed the whole of that community with stored power.
Right.
And so you're right. So, I mean, and that's what Storr was alluding to again. If you put 32 panels on your roof, I'm not sure that you're going to need all of the electricity you'll generate with 32 panels. And so therefore, what he's talking about is that you would then share. And this is part of what we learned about at the Energy Next conference, about the people that are actually working on exactly that, and examples of that, which we'll give you a little bit in some future time, of how they're doing that. In Canberra, for example, they've got a whole project where they've got 350 schools and households that are all generating power, but are all sharing it with one another.
Right.
And so the weakest point is for every single household to have to be completely reliant and that's why Saul's talking about the need for us to still have, for example, hydro or wind or solar farm power as well.
Right. Yeah. What about this hydrogen that they're talking about?
Yes, well, there's a whole new story there. Green hydrogen, that was another thing we did a lot of learning about at the Energy Next conference.
Yes. That seems to be the latest thing they're discussing.
It's still a fair way away.
Yeah. Right. Thank you.
The same with ammonia. Ammonia is another thing people talk about, but the people who are researching ammonia, for example, are still saying, well, we can do things on a small scale, but we can't do things on a big scale.
Right.
But there's an enormous amount of research that's going on and technology that's being developed.
Yeah. Thank you, David, and thank you, Peter, and thank you, Kathy, for those comments. Anyone else like to say anything?
How much would the whole thing cost?
How much would the whole thing cost?
You mean?
For to electrify a whole suburb, or which I think for a house, electrify a whole house?
Well, it depends very much where you are in relation to how much sun you're going to get or how much shade you've got, for example. It depends on where you are in relation to the cheapest form of electricity is to generate and use the electricity in the same space. So that's why Saul's saying 5 cents a kilowatt if you're generating it on your own roof and using it in your own house. As soon as we start talking about transmitting that power to somewhere else, then it's going to cost you more. It'll cost you more, for example, if you're in shady areas. So it depends very much on, again, how many panels that you want in terms of your dual system. Catherine's talking about them needing 28 panels. Well, some places don't need that many. For example, I had 8, and if I put another 8 on, then I would have been able to go off grid with a battery.
Is it to get the panels?
I heard somewhere the other day, probably on 2GB, that somebody's invented, an Australian's invented tiles.
Yes, that's exactly right. And there are cars that carry solar panels in their roof. And they charge the battery and come home and plug it into your home system. Although again, that's a way away as yet. There are people talking about inventing batteries with water. So, you know, this is what I mean about a community education program. It's not just, and that's what Peter's touching on too, it's not just why it's important to do it. It is the advances that are there and the technology that is now absolutely available to do it with. I mean, I bought a totally electric car. And in terms of the cost of it, with the subsidy from the government, it cost me very little more than what I would have if I bought a normal sedan. I charge my car for $10 a week. That's a bit different to filling up a petrol tank.
Yes.
And all I can tell you is it's absolutely wonderful, beautiful to drive.
How do you charge it when you're you've got a charger in your garage? Have you
I just charge off 240 volts. So it's just charged on my normal electricity account, Carolyn. But I mean,
in a unit, so there's
yeah, that's where I am. I'm in an apartment.
Yeah.
And all I do is plug it into my 240 volt power point.
Right.
I charge it overnight. I plug it in, let's say 5 o'clock at night, and by next morning it's fully charged. For example, we've been to Orange 3 times in it. That's just one example. I get to Lithgow, pull it up to a fast charger provided by the NRMA for nothing. 20 minutes later, after I've had a cup of coffee, I hop in the car and away we go, fully charged again.
David, there are no fast chargers in the local area, are there?
Yes, there are. They're up at St Ives Centre.
All right.
They're also, where else is there? A couple of other ones.
Linfield parking area underneath the Linfield Green on the east side. The council have put in charging stations.
Right, yeah.
I mean, the NRMA has got chargers all over New South Wales. MG is about to put 1,600 chargers in rural areas in Australia.
Right.
You know, that once again, it's what people don't know. And you know, people laughed at me in my apartment when I said I was buying an electric car. They just thought I was stupid, the same as when Peter put in his evaporative heating system.
Well, that's the point, though. In your garage, in your apartment block, it's down somewhere, you know, in a cage. Are you parked in a cage or something?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you just plug it into the electricity. But see, in our garage, it's not your individual electricity in your cage. It's a community one.
Well, ours isn't. See, it's what's called embedded, and that's actually an impediment for us. Because if, for example, I was able to convince everybody here, like they were in the 70 apartments in Sydney, to actually go with the same electricity provider, first of all, they were able to negotiate a huge reduction in the rate that the electricity provider was giving them. They're all on green energy. And as a result of that, they were able to put panels on their roof because there was no argy-bargy about you know, who was going to get the energy generated. So one of the big problems I've got in our apartment is that as soon as I bring it up, the argument is, well, the only account that we can put it against is our community account. And because we're such a small apartment, we generate a heck of a lot more electricity than what our community account would. But in the 70 apartments, what they did was they found they were generating more electricity. So they all pooled their water heating bills, and they found out that their water heating bills were pretty much similar. So now all of their water heating for their hot water is actually paid out of the money they're getting back from the solar panels that they're generating renewable energy on the roof. So there's all sorts of other things that open up once you start to look into it and do it.
Yeah, so I guess really what we're doing is seeing is this renewable revolution that we are actually going to be confronting, and it's going to happen. It's just going to happen because the technology is there. And when we finish our video, we'll be showing you some of the technology that we witnessed at this amazing renewable energy expo with so many different varieties of batteries and things like that. But I guess what we have to also work out is really to put pressure on the 3 levels of government in our local area to say we wish and we want this to happen. And that's where we are now. And we're just sort of like at the preliminary stage of working on this sort of project of what to do. So, as I said, we've got a website called rewiringbradfield.energy, where we're asking people to sign on so that we can try and promote this. And as I said, this is very much an infant stage, but we feel that if we don't do something about it, then we're missing the opportunity. And I think that there is so much going to be happening at on a federal level and a state level, but it also has to be pushed from a local level, because that's where the change is going to happen. And we want change that's genuine, that's going to really improve the lives of our community. And that has to be, again, driven by local residents.
I can hardly touch that finger because one finger's so swish.
Okay. Now, so David, do you want to sum up with the project at all, and then we'll move to our slides of what's happening locally in the
well, I mean, very quickly, I mean, we are yet to have a group of us sitting down face-to-face meeting with one another. What's happened so far is in discussions with Janine, I've drafted a possible agenda for our first meeting with the sort of questions that we might be asking and looking at. My idea is that we're spending most of the rest of this year doing strategic planning after we've found out a lot of information, and also begun a community education program. They're really the 2 prongs at the moment. What we're looking for is anybody who's interested in joining us in basically becoming part of the small group that's going to be the driving force behind the program. That would be really wonderful if you would like to do that. We need people who are not only interested, but we particularly need people who've got expertise as electrical engineers, people who have got expertise in renewable energy, whatever. So if anybody is interested or knows anyone who might be interested, then please put us in touch with those people.
Yes, I have
so
a
I think
neighbour that
Janine,
we've been talking to.
Sorry, Catherine.
We've got a neighbour that seems very knowledgeable about it, and that's why we've been talking to him about the system that we should get.
Well, we basically see ourselves doing a lot of talking with a lot of people and a lot of groups to come up with a strategic plan that we can begin to operate from 2023 onwards. So, yeah, I think our first meeting, we're hoping, is going to be next Tuesday. Is that right, Janine?
On Monday, yeah.
On Monday, sorry, Monday next week. So if anybody, would like to join with us in that, then...
Everyone has my contact details, so if you're interested, just let me know. My number 0428 860 623.
If anybody's got any ideas or things they want to put to us, then it would be really great to have those ideas, those suggestions, because none of us at the moment would say that we're experts in any way at all. It's all a new ball game.
So when and where on Monday?
At Gordon at 11 o'clock at my place.
Wayne, are you seriously saying you've got time to come to a meeting on Monday?
No, but I just thought it'd be useful for people to realise exactly when it was.
Yeah.
I'm going to make a cup of tea and then make a cake, and you're welcome to come to my place at 11 o'clock. Some people know where I am, but at Gordon, just give me a ring. I'll give you the finer details, and so that we can start working on this. All right, well, we'll just now, thank you everyone again for coming and joining us. And I just want to show you a couple of other things that are happening. So there is a lot of things happening on Ku-ring-gai Council. On the 4th of August, which is only 2 days away on Thursday, they're having a talk on community renewables and electrification. So it's going to be very interesting if someone can go to that and have a look at it and comparing it with what Saul has said. In the evening, they're having a talk on electric vehicles and sustainable transport. So that will be very interesting.
I'll take a photo of it.
Next slide.
Oh, hold on.
Oh,
Oh, sorry, did you want to copy that?
actually,
Yeah,
you've got them. It says 12 and 4 at the bottom, but there's 6, is it? It should have been 6, should it? I just
Yeah, it
realised.
should be 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock, yeah. I made a typo there.
Well, there's meetings actually all day, but they're on different things. Yeah.
Yeah.
You got it?
What will happen is I'll send this information out. I'll hand this now, next slide, to Wayne to talk about. This is the
Yeah, look,
renewable.
this is not my idea. This is Janine who keeps pushing this. But look, you might as well. You know that the slideshows I do at the end is the music is all from Lucy Woven, the group that I've been coordinating for 26 years, and we have a brand new concert starting this weekend with a couple of retirement village performances, and then the following weekend there's the first of six public performances, and those first of those 6 public performances of our concert, it's called Wired and Awake, is in your area. It says South Turramurra Uniting Church on the Friday night, the 12th of August. So you'd be very welcome to come. Won't cost you anything. And it's got some great music. Sorry.
Then Ku-ring-gai Council is going to start a new eco-sustainable festival in September. So it's something to keep out and watch.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I think we missed one, didn't we? We missed that one. Sorry.
Yeah, Hornsby Council has got a webinar on the 17th of August about solar and batteries from 7 to 8 p.m.
Okay, and sorry, and then this one, which is the performance here at Hall, my house, my church, on the Saturday the 27th of August at 3 p.m. So if you want, that's another opportunity. There'll be a slide at the end of the musical which has got all the performances on. Or if you go to lucywoven.org, search for Lucy Woven, you'll find where they all are. There's Eastwood Uniting Church as well. Anyway, there's that one that you just mentioned a second ago, didn't you? Yep.
Yeah, and then,
then
so we're going to try and have another webinar on the first Tuesday of September, which is the 6th of September. So from our meeting on Monday, we'll sort of plan another event. Thanks to Wayne's support, who helps him with webinars. He's available on that day.
And the most important thing is bring as many people as you can to the webinar.
That's right. And that's right. We bring as many people as you can. Forward the email onto people. So we're going to finish now with our visit to the Renew Economy thing. We always finish off with a musical item to show you some of the high things that we saw that kind of inspire us. So over to you, Wayne.
Okay.
beautiful to be loved.
Thank you, Wayne, for choosing that beautiful music for a
Thanks,
beautiful
Wayne.
project to make a beautiful world. And that's really what we're trying to do, to try and change the mindset. And really, we have to think about the beauty of the future rather than the opposite of it. So thank you, everyone, for coming. And
Thank
we'll
you,
see you
Janine.
next month.
Thank you.
See you.
See you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, I'm sitting here feeling miserable because many years ago, my husband and I installed solar panels on our lengthy house. Good, excellent, lovely. Then he died, and I had to move to Sydney to be near my daughter. So I had to sell the house.
Oh, well, that is a sad story, Beverly.
How dare he die?
Well, Beverly, what I have to tell you is the most important thing I came away from the conference was I wish that I was back in my old house, because I realised how well advanced and how far in front we were when we were living there, and how far we are behind now in this place.
Yes.
So I share your sad story.
Yes.
Thanks, everyone. Take
Okay,
care.
see ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey.